2 o'clock and declare the meeting at Tumbarumba open today. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the Wiradjuri people and acknowledge elders past and present and that we're meeting on their land today. We have one leave of absence, that's Mayor James Hayes. We have mover and seconder, Councillor Wright and Councillor Cross. All those in favour? Are there any other apologies or leave of absence requests? All right, declarations of pecuniary interest.
There's a discussion regarding the human itself. I'm a member of the building, RSL sub-branch building. I'm a member of the sub-branch, but I'm not on the board. I haven't spoken to anyone on the executive board at all about that motion.
Non-board member.
No pecuniary interest.
No pecuniary interest. Public forum. All right. Confirmation of the ordinary minutes from the 14th of December. Councillor Ham, there. Councillor Islam, seconded. Is there any corrections? If there are no corrections, I'll put that we move those. All those in favour? Carried. The extraordinary meeting on the 25th of January. Councillor Ham, Councillor Cross. Any corrections? No corrections, I'll put that. All those in favour? Carried. Is there any business arising from either of those two meetings? Or any business arising? No. I just have one matter, and that's to do with the pool at Adelon. I don't know whether you want to keep it as operational or I can move a motion, get some advice from you, but that we get a report with costing on the mechanisation of the pool cup.
We can do that as an operation now.
Does anyone else?
Business arriving, is it?
From previous minutes, yeah.
Yeah, from the previous minutes, just about the Blue Green Alley. Just if we could have an update from someone on that.
Mr. Mayor, can I invite Mr. Ben McGrath to speak to that?
Thank you. Council is continuing to undertake testing at Lake and downstream, including the Naz Creek, that flows into Tumbarumba Creek and Tumbarumba. Testing downstream is showing evidence of the algae clearing up, but it's still on red alert due to the levels in the lake itself, which will impact downstream. And yeah, we're continuing to monitor and assist the lead holders downstream as per the council resolution.
Could I ask a question? And have we heard back from the professor?
Professor Simon, he's still working on his report. I had some discussion with him last week, and they're doing some further analysis of samples, so haven't had a report back.
Any further questions? Okay, we move on to notices of motion. We have a notice of motion from Councillor Pritchard, and I note there that he's also declared a non-pecuniary interest with regard to that motion. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Bender?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Timid RSL building has been sitting there empty for some time. As you know, the RSL Club and the RSL Sub-Branch are two separate entities, and the RSL Sub-Branch owns the building. The club itself was a separate entity, and that has failed and has joined on with the bowling club, so it's no longer party to this. So it's really the RSL the RSL building sitting there empty, and whether we allow that to sit there empty or allow it to be sold off for some other commercial activity is a question of whether we should purchase the building for use as a community centre with the emphasis on youth, so that there's an area in the middle of town where the youth, we've talked about suicide, well, there's nowhere that the youth can gather presently, except, it's started with a swimming pool and so forth, but we need to have somewhere like the Busy Cares Centre in Sunshine, Victoria, where you have a building where youth can walk in and they can play snooker or play the computers and talk to each other and whatever, but they feel it's their own place. And in addition to those sort of community activities, we have consulting rooms which can be used by community workers, be volunteer solicitors or volunteer doctors or whatever, or nurses or whoever, who can make their time available to be a one-on-one with the kids that walk in, that won't have the kids that normally don't go to the doctor or don't go to the lawyers. Now they want to have to talk to some elder in their community where there's some sympathy. At the present moment they've got all sorts of government bodies, but they're challenging for any kid that's feeling disenfranchised. We don't have a community centre in our town. And the guys that went to war, in the Second World War, they preserved our country for all of us. We're benefiting from what they did. And I don't think it's too much for us. And they would want us to do something like that. They went and saved our country for our present community. And it's up to us to try and save our kids from what's happening to them. We've talked about suicide prevention. I think they're going about the wrong way. I think by the time they get to the level that this lady was talking about, they've become disenfranchised, they've gone onto the drugs and whatever. We need somewhere which we can give them hope and pull the community together. Now the building itself is on a very large block of land. It's a very large building, and whether it's sound physically, I'm not sure, I'm not in a position to know, but before we make a final decision, I think we should, as I said here in the article, we should undertake due diligence of us, make sure that it's, what it would be up for repairs and putting it back to use again. That should be done. And we could, I think, incorporate in the preserving the entrance hallway down below there with the scenes of the war and the Jack Ryan Memorial there, and we even put the Jack Ryan Memorial outside. We should be able to keep some history of the RSL thing as a part of it. So that's I think that's why I put it up, and I think we could also, as far as how you're going to use it, well, immediately comes to mind we could remove the community development team from the building on the corner and move that across there. But presently the community development team is in the building below the library, and you don't see the kids walking in there. But if you've got them down in that building, as they walk up and down the street, they might drop in, have a cup of coffee, or have a chat. I think the community development team would be well situated. He may be able to put other community facilities in there. He may even want to put a tourist information centre there. We spent $150,000 a year with the arrangement with the National Parks, which is excellent. I'm not suggesting we should do that, but there must be some council facilities you can move across there to make it private. You may be able to do this and get other community groups involved. But if we let this one go, it's gone.
Does anyone wish to speak against the motion? Or does anyone want to move into committee to discuss it further?
Move to committee, yes.
Moved by Councillor Elizabeth, seconded by Councillor Cross. All those in favour of going into committee? It's carried. Councillor Elizabeth?
I'm all for maintaining buildings for use in any community, and don't like to see buildings going derelict in any community. But I think what we have with Jeff's suggestion here is Councillor Pritchard is suggesting that we take on board this building. I wholeheartedly support that, but we need, as he said, due diligence. So in reference to purchasing it right now, I think we perhaps need a report to come back to council that would give us the information we would need. And talk to us about some of the options we could use, and many of them I've supported with what Jeff has said. But it's important that we recognise that it's a big commitment for council and an ongoing cost to council in something like this, and that's not something that I'm quite concerned about in relation to.
I'd like to see where the budget comes
Yes.
from, where the money comes from, and how we're going to not only just purchasing it today as the ongoing annual maintenance budgets, etc., running costs that we should be always looking at.
And
But I agree with Jeff, I like the idea.
No, the settlement's fantastic.
Yeah.
we have no idea what the situation is in relation to sale of that property at the moment, do we?
No, 'cause it's not on the market yet.
I'm sorry, which the sale.
Of the property, what price it's about?
Oh, they talk, well, I believe that they might be putting out for tender. And, I've got the figure in my mind, but whether it's factual or not, I'm not prepared to say. But the motion is not to buy the building, but it's well, I'm saying purchase the building, but it's subject to satisfactory negotiations. In other words, something that we all agree on. That may come back to it. We have to ask the owners what they want for it. We have to get a report of what the state is and how much it costs to fix it up. Thinking about what community services could be put in there and how much it all costs.
Your recommendation actually says though to purchase, is what you're asking us.
Yeah, but subject to. I mean,
Maybe you could just change the wording, maybe the general manager might be able to help out with.
Yeah, if you want to clarify the fact that you want a report back, even though Jeff has made it very clear it's subject to satisfactory negotiations and due diligence, which the council seeks a report from staff regarding the purchase of the Tumbarumba RSL building.
yeah, I'll be happy with that.
I feel more comfortable with that. Yeah.
I would support the, if I may, sorry, it's not there. If I may just support the idea of multi-use of the building, including counsellors and medical and other provisions that young people would not normally access, as well as attractive facilities for young people to enjoy, indoor skating or whatever we can come up with. For that then to become a holistic centre, I think is a very good idea.
Deputy Mayor, one of the things that was really interesting at the interagency meeting that Jeff and I attended was that the youth are much more interested in services coming to them rather than having services that they then access. And we were listening to other organisations saying how they would host a barbecue in a local open space for youth to come. So I'm not sure that we necessarily have to think about a space for them to come to, but rather the other way around. That we as the organisation have a space, or go to their space.
And Mr. General Manager, I imagine that we'll be able to have some discussion with the real estate with regard to the perhaps commercial in confidence opportunities that may or may not present themselves in that report, so that we could make a decision.
Mr. Chairman, we have been contacted by the real estate agent that will be acting on behalf of RSL, and they have indicated they wish to have discussions with us about that.
Oh, I'm happy with the change, so I'd like to move that.
Moved by Councillor Isbell, seconded by Councillor Ham, that we move out of committee. All those in favour? It's carried. Councillor Pritchard, you happy with the amendment there?
Yes, I'll make that point.
All right. And Councillor Benjamin, you're happy? All right. Is there any further discussion? All right, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? Carried.
I wonder whether we'll get have an inspection of the building arranged for the stage, so the council should go and have a look around, kick the can, so to speak.
I'll provide a whole lot of information. We'll have a look at that. Yep. Thank you.
All right, item 8.1 is a minimal minute. Councillor request to attend conference. Purpose of the report is to advise councillor conference requests. You seek approval for the attendance. There's two recommendations there, which I'm happy to move. Do you have a second? Oh, an amendment there to add Councillor Ham to amendment 2.
Number 2.
Is there a second to that, Councillor Ham? Anyone wish to speak against it? Put that. All those in favour? Against? It's carried. Okay, 8.2 is joint organisations of councils. There's currently 5 recommendations there.
Can I move that we go to committee discussions?
Councillor Pritchard, move to go to committee. Councillor Cross is seconding that. All in favour? Yes, that's carried. Councillor Pritchard.
This is one of the most serious decisions we'll be making, and in my history, local government was probably the most serious. It's not just about forming a regional grouping in councils, it's about a major change in the administration of state government into these joint organisations. And once we're in one, it'll be very difficult, if not impossible, to change. For many years, we've been trying to get closer to the Canberra area for many reasons. One is about economic development, one's about tourism, one's about having access to very talented people to give us advice. We have a lot of people in this community who go and work over in that part of the world. We get quite a few people from Canberra, one sitting around the table who've escaped from Canberra and settled here. And I think if we look at the long-term future with Canberra, with the international airport there, it really is going to be the economic generator of this part of the world. And although we've been in re-rock in the western area, and we've got a lot of historical common with that area, we don't have that much in common with them industrially, and we don't meet with many of them, and they really don't have the same geography that we have. So I feel that we should, we've got a motion on that, we've passed a motion that we apply to join as an associate member. I think that should be upgraded, that we should apply to become a full member. The local government sent a circular out, which you should have received 6 days ago, on 16th of February, about an extension to the nomination deadline and some other details. And so they've given us a bit of wiggle room. We've got until the, the 23rd of March, yes, before we put a final nominations in. So we don't have to make a final decision today, but we need to actually have and work towards a final decision. James Hayes is across in Canberra at a meeting there with the Canberra region people this afternoon and tomorrow. And he said he's going to talk to them about this as well. What the outcome will be, I don't know. But it's something I think we should be looking at. Historically, this council, we were involved in the Canberra Regional Leaders Forum in the past, so we had a lot of association previously. we made a deliberate decision some years ago when the Yarralumne Shire was abolished to purchase the land between that part of the Shire, their Shire, which was between Chile and the Canberra border. And we did that for the one purpose of getting a common border with the ACT for future political and economic development. That was done, we took out a lot of land which had no rates and quite a large obligation. We did that deliberately to try and move closer to Canberra for the economic development. And I think this is just a next step in that confirmation of that. So it's a serious decision. As far as REDOC's concerned, that was set up, well, I helped set it up in the first place. It was always been a cooperative thing by Richmond and photocopy paper and so forth. And really, I think its day is, well, its day is done. It's no longer going to exist as that body was. The membership of voted again won't be with REDOC, will be with the Albany group, and the two water councils are no longer relevant. And the structure of it doesn't really suit us. I don't think we should be looking at REDOC. And as far as these other councils are concerned, there are some of those there that we have zero in common with and we never will have. I don't think we should be influenced by sentimental things like past connections. We have to look at what's best for this community, where we're going to go in the future.
So I agree with what Jeff has said entirely, but is there some way that we have now got to reduce that number on that particular listing that we've got there as our council area for joint organisations before I discuss further?
If I may, through the chair, there's lots of different options if you consider the previous report I had to council. So one of the options is a joint organisation with Ramrock and REROC, ends up about 20 councils, which I would think would be difficult to come to a conclusion about regional significance. There's one option to look at REROC group of councils as a separate organisation. About 10 councils, as Councillor Pritchard has indicated, some very different communities of interest there and very different priorities. There's an option there to look at a small group of councils. Wagga and Canberra are our two large communities of interest, but probably a little bit around those as well, so we could go for a smaller group. Can't go below 3 members in a joint organisation. And the other option, as Councillor Pritchard has indicated, is to become an associate member or request to become a full member. The restrictions at the moment in the legislation is that you can only have a joint organisation within a planning area. There is one exception to that they've allowed, and that's for the Western councils to join outside of the planning area. At the moment, there's nothing to say that we could become a member of the Canberra JO, and we would want to talk to the Canberra JO, obviously, about whether they would like to see us as a member. And we would have to request the Minister specifically to make a decision outside of the legislation, which would be a required change to the legislation if we were to become a full member of the Canberra JO. So there's plenty of options out there. The Minister had already given us an extension of time, and when the Mayor and myself were at a meeting in Narrandera, we raised a whole lot of issues around conflict of interest, because one group of councils in REROC had actually been given an extension of time, but no other council in New South Wales had been given an extension of time. But because the legislation has now changed about rescinding a motion, it actually meant that there was a major conflict then, because some councils would make a resolution, couldn't rescind that resolution, another council make it later, and it was just going to cause a logistic nightmare around that. So we do have to the 23rd now, so council doesn't have to make a decision at this meeting. We can just make it in. Our meeting is on the 24th next month. So 22nd. Is it 22nd? Is it? Sorry. No. Yeah. Okay. So it's the 21st that it's extended to. Is it?
Yeah, the 23rd.
So we're scraping more on that. Yeah. So you could wait to that, or you could hold a special meeting. This is a significant issue, so we could call a special meeting for the purpose of just making a decision about the JO. As Councillor Pritchard has indicated, this is probably one of the biggest decisions you're going to make. We want to make sure that we're in with a group that can make a decision, and we want to make sure that we're in a group that can look strategically at infrastructure and not begin with looking at our council, but look at how our council area could benefit from some bigger, broader things happening in the region. And that might end up being absolutely nothing happening in the Snowy Valleys area at that high end, but Snowy Valleys benefiting from that. Or it could be stuff happening in Snowy Valleys that benefits other communities that would come into our area, like Gundagai or something like that.
If we were to delay, it would mean that we could have a special meeting and we have a report from our mayor, who's there in council in Canberra at the moment, and as Councillor Pritchard has said, speaking to people involved. I'd be hesitant to make a decision this meeting because, given the fact that our mayor will come back with information for us, I think we should delay this and hold a special meeting at some stage for us to hear what our mayor has to report.
The other thing is, how possible is it for the department or whoever it is to change their minds about going out of our planning area?
Well, if you can pull up on your hub and look up the circular that's in there somewhere.
Just going to clarify, that circular is a draft regulation, so if it's not in there, we do have the opportunity to provide feedback and say we want some more flexibility in there.
The circular above here, and you can find it there, stated the circular number 18-02, 16th of February, so it's only 6 days ago. And then the key points at the bottom of the page, the bottom dot point. Councils should list all potential councils that they may form a JO within their resolution. That's interesting because before they wanted you to have an agreement with those councils, but they're not doing that now because they realise it's virtually impossible to come to an agreement. So they're asking everyone to list those councils which have something in common, and the government will make the decisions there. That's the key thing there. But the next sentence is the key one. I think it's been watered down. This generally, and the word generally is interesting, this generally comprises councils in the same state planning region only. Now that doesn't say they must be in the state planning, that means if there's real pressure and a special case that the government is not bound they can vary that. And it does say that extended far west region councils may join a JO in an adjacent region. So there's not beyond the possibility of going with the Canberra region. We'll see what James has got to say. On a Tumbarumba check, Mike Kelly wrote me, and he thought it was a good idea that he's federal, of course, that when our future lay in the Canberra region. And James, I think, was saying that John Valerio, as deputy member of the deputy premier of New South Wales, who's based in Queensland, felt that we should go that way as well. So it's all in a bit of a mix at the moment, and I think we should think about it and discuss it with James as soon as he gets back.
So, with respect to what you're saying, Jeff, and I listened to your argument closely, I just worry, particularly the southern end, like particularly all the way down to a river border. It's, it's 5 hours drive from there to Canberra. Not that distance means that much, but when we're talking about I just feel we're closely aligned with the Wagga City. And
well, those associations to Wagga will never disappear. You'll always have to be the same. Isn't a barbed wire fence up there? We're still going to be dealing with those, with health and shopping and economic development, tourism and those sort of things. But one of the things that concerns me about the REROC type of arrangements is that the chairman of REROC, who presently is the chairman of one of the small councils, will be our mouthpiece to the government, because one of the functions of these new joint organisations will be intergovernmental relations. That means that we won't be able to just go directly to the ministers. We'll have to go through Rock, who's in one of the Western councils at present, without the same economic interests. I just...
Well, I agree we should ask Canberra and see where they want us, and then we can move forward on this.
If they don't want us, well, that's it.
Yeah.
It's a done deal.
Yeah.
Don't know whether we can get any clarification on some of this stuff. On page 33 and 34, there's two tables there. I presume one is the contribution from the state government for 300,000, which is for the JO. And then the second one appears to be council's in-kind contribution to Rock. So, is there any explanation of what the significant figures are? There's $213,913.40 projected for executive services. I'd like to know what that is. Exorbitant amounts for telephone, printing, insurance, travel, catering, legal, accounting, rent. There's nothing left.
Sorry, what page are we on?
34.
So through the chair, there's Rock have resolved on two different options to move forward. So as Rock as a whole, all councils voted on which of the preferred options they'd like. The joint organisation does have to have an executive officer. It's just like a local government. Whereas at the moment, the regional organisations of councils have a whole lot of different functions and ways that they're set up. Rock is actually set up as an entirely separate organisation, therefore it doesn't have to employ an executive officer. The model here basically shows that we have to employ an executive officer, and it shows that being employed and budgeted out as a full-time executive officer, and that's on the executive salary band. There is an option to form a JO where you don't require quite such a large contribution. So one of the proposals that I have heard is that the executive officer actually be one of the GMs, and that rotates around the councils until the JO gets to a point where it is a big functioning body and it needs that full-time support, and we know it's going to work, and then you go out and employ someone. Executive services will be supplied by each of the councils to assist that general manager to do it. So there's cheaper options to do that, without a doubt. And to be honest, we don't really know how these JOs will function. The potential of them is absolutely fantastic, but we have to see them actually achieve before we want to dedicate a lot of resources. Because as Deputy Mayor has indicated, the contributions can be large or small in there, and it is a concern, and we get funding for that for the first year from the government, but we may not, and probably likely not, to get funding off into the future. So if we form a big organisation that's big cost, it's our ratepayers that are going to be paying for that in the long term.
We asked the government representative at the meeting we had in Wagga whether the executive officer of the JO could be based in one of the constituent councils. And he said, yes, quite clearly. And that would be the cheapest way of doing it. And with the electronics the way they are, I can't see there's any reason to have it being outside bureaucracy.
I mean, under that model, there's only 17,000 change out of the 300.
Correct. So that's an annual fee.
Do we have any idea of what membership to the JO of Canberra would cost?
Through the chair, the membership of the joint organisation Canberra will be 75% as an associate member. They haven't established their fees because obviously they're not an organisation yet. So there's still a pilot program that is still running on the side. Rock was a pilot program as well, but it ceased to operate that JO function. I'm unsure of those costs at this stage. So we do have to consider also, if we're going to become an associate member of one and a full member of the other, there's going to be two sets of fees. 75% is not a lot. It's not the full membership, it's still significant on ratepayers.
So it would make sense if we can join the organisation that we are already paying 75% of the fee. It would be.
I would think through the chair that we would want to have an associate membership either way. So if we were to become a full member of the Canberra JO, for instance, we would want to become an associate member of Wagga or Albury JO. So I don't think that's going to really change.
Just before we go, if there's no further discussion, if your intention is to defer this to another meeting, we will have to go out of committee, and then a procedural motion will have to be moved and seconded to defer the report to a future meeting to
Because that
proceed
motion
advice.
hasn't been accepted yet.
I'll move to go out of committee.
Councillor Pritchard, Councillor Hand, all those in favour? It's carried. Does somebody want to move that we...
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, there I move that we postpone this discussion until after we have met with the Mayor and heard his report.
Can I suggest some wording through the chair? So we could move a procedural motion to defer item 8.2 to a future meeting of the council due to request for further information being provided on joint organisations.
Should we also add to that to us, Canberra, JO, whether they will have it?
Yeah, yes.
Yep. Probably a bit better.
Are you happy with that? Councillor Pritchard, you were seconding that?
Yep.
Just I'll just
Yeah,
wait
but-
for Susan to be able to read my writing.
Have a drink of water.
So the procedural motion to defer council
On camera.
Leave it right. Okay, so the motion's been put to defer item 8.2 to a future meeting of council on the basis that further information be provided on joint organisation discussions, and the council seek the Canberra JO's views on Snowy Valley's council becoming a full member of their joint organisation. Happy with that, Councillor?
Yeah.
Councillor Pritchard? No further discussion, I'll put that. All those in favour? Against? That's carried. 8.3, pecuniary interest returns to councillors and designated staff. We have a recommendation there, and there's an amendment to got to add councillor Cross to the list.
Move the recommendation.
Councillor Isserman's moved the recommendation. Is there a second? Councillor Cross. Any discussion? All those in favour? Against? That's carried. Governance and financial reports, 8.4, draft model code of meeting practice for local councils consultation. We have one recommendation there. Councillor Hand, you're moving that? Councillor Isselman seconded. Is there any discussion? I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? That's carried. 8.5, adoption of council media policies. Recommendation is there with 4 points.
Move all recommendations.
Councillor Isselman moved all 4. Councillor Ryder seconded all 4. Any discussion? Wish to speak, Councillor Isselman?
No, thank you.
Any further discussion? All those in favour? Against? It's carried. The quarterly budget review, 8.6, as at the 31st of December 2017. There's 3 recommendations there. Do we have a move for that? Councillor Ham, seconded by Councillor Cross. Is there any discussion?
I'd like to discuss point 3, the council provide guidance into where to fund the 140,000 shortfall in swimming pool income, and I think that's quite likely that that will be more because of the success of the free entry. I imagine staff costs will be higher. And through the chair, if it's okay if I ask Sarah?
Move to committee?
Oh, do I move to committee?
Yeah, if you'd like to, that's fine.
If I could, please.
Councillor Ham's requesting to move to committee. We have a seconder. Councillor Isselman, all those in favour? Against? That's carried.
Sarah, what's your recommendation as to where we will find that money?
You can take it from Parks and Gardens budgets or roads budgets, road maintenance budgets. Yeah, it's.
And they're not from reserves?
If you take it from reserves, you're going to increase our loss for the year after capital items by the 140. But you can take it from reserves and fund it through cash. Yes.
Okay. And have you seen against the actuals at the moment?
We'll have a better knowledge of how much the actual cost and increase in staff time will be in the next QPR. So we might have to do another adjustment in the third QPR as well.
Okay.
So is
Councillor Isselman, sorry, Councillor Isselman.
So, Deputy Mayor, I'm concerned that the amount is not an accurate amount, and that perhaps should not be in that particular motion. That we should just really the council provide guidance on where funds for the shortfall should come from, because it could be quite a different figure altogether, and I think that perhaps should be removed from there.
If I may, through the chair, it's a budget. The budget doesn't have to be like an accurate thing.
Right.
So, and that's why the staff members indicated that we will come back at the next meeting when we've got more realistic figures and make another adjustment to a budget. Your budget doesn't have to cover your expenditure absolutely perfectly through the leeway.
Councillor Coff.
Deputy Mayor, what impact, if it is taken out of one of these other budgets like Parks and Recreation, what impact will that have on the services that that provides currently?
I'd refer that to the General Manager.
So I was writing something down. Can I ask the question again, please?
What impact will that have to the services if we take it out of one of those other budgets?
So at the moment, the staff recommendation is there to take it from the Parks and Gardens budget. I don't believe that will have a significant impact on the service levels that are currently being operated in that area. This staff have been asked about that, and we believe that we can still operate at the same service level for that reduced budget.
Question?
Councillor Wright first.
That was my question virtually was what are we going to miss out on in Parks and Gardens, for instance, and the other one was if we take it out of reserves and it shows a loss, so what's the deal there, you know, like
I'll take the first one first through the chair, and that is that we've got a whole lot of works happening at the moment from the merger funds, so that is impacting on our ability to provide greater infrastructure, etc. So some of that work is causing us to not be doing so much work on other areas that we would normally be doing, so that's hence why it's able to be funded. And if the Chairman is happy to take the second part of the question to the Finance Manager.
When we do our budgets yearly, you base your budget on your profit equaling your expenditure. So if you're not changing your budgets around, if you're taking the income out, you're going to have a loss.
Yeah.
But we base our budgets on balanced budgets. So your profit and loss is zero, if not profit.
Councillor Isselman.
Deputy Mayor, I'd also like to have put in point 3 for this financial year, because as it stands, it could go on forever.
And that's the review, the process we've got, isn't it? Because we need to know recurrently what this is going to be.
Yes.
So,
Councillor Pritchard?
For the comments today.
Mr. Deputy Mayor, I'd be reluctant to take out parks and gardens because I think they've got a massive area that they're looking after. Some of the areas, such as Stockwell Park, has really fallen below the normal standards. That leaves me how the present staff is coping with it at present, and I had in the back of my mind thinking up that perhaps we should be looking at more staff parks and gardens. I don't think we've got an apprentice for parks and gardens at the moment. So I'd be likely to take the money out of that. After all, that's why people come to this town, come to this shire.
I think it's one of the things, it's one of our great assets is the parks and gardens, and one of the things that we've discussed around here is that maybe with, we just see that Tumbarumba's maybe a little higher level of maintenance in parks and gardens than Tumut, and we should be really focusing on that to share it and bring us all together and make it much better. So I agree with Jeff. I don't think if we can avoid it,
Mr. Chair, I can refer to the quarterly budget review papers. Current expenditure for parks and gardens is tracking at around 50% of the overall budget. So about 800,000.
so it's significant. Just having it in this financial year is important.
Yes. So so there is room to be able to move with regard, even if council were to give instruction to increase the levels of service on our parks, given that we're over 50% of the way through the year. I don't think we would be addressing the full amount of budget.
I think if Mr. Christensen and Mr. Hyder are giving us an operational guarantee that there's going to be no service level drops, and we have to take that, I suppose, Councillor Pritchard.
And the discussion of, like, this is a bit unusual to have such a shortfall, isn't it? So, and the discussion on where we need to discuss recurrently where we're going to get the money if we continue with this.
But then we need to wait for the review of how well it's gone.
Really is costing,
And how much it has cost.
Well, there's no doubt it's gone well.
Oh, yes, but what are the implications of that currently?
And I don't think that in the future we necessarily need to take it from other budgets, as we said, because there are reserves we can look at, and there are certainly investment portfolios that we could reduce by a certain amount of money. I mean, it's not just that only one choice. So,
All right, so you've foreshadowed a couple of amendments there, Councillor.
yeah, just watching.
So we might just wait till they're finalised. Is there any further discussion in committee about that before we?
I'd just like to reinforce the fact that it's been an incredibly successful exercise, and when we look at the numbers of people who were attending the pool during the summer, it has been a great community service, and for the small amount of money and the most amazing amount of health benefits that we received right across the whole of the Shire. I think it's been a remarkable and really worthwhile project, and we should seek to continue it and endeavour to find the shortfall.
I'd like to set the canteen a bit healthier, but
Yes, there has been discussion about that.
Little steps.
Councillor, sorry, I missed
That's
some
all right.
of that
That's
discussion.
we're just.
Current level.
Service levels.
So if you're content to move out of committee,
Just wait till we get.
Is
Do we want to put this year? Yeah,
put this year there.
that's fine.
do we need an approximate one for you? Or?
Yeah, because we need to know, before we're taking it out of someone's budget, we need to know the correct
We
amount.
need to be definitive about the figure, remembering, sorry, through the chair, remembering that this is a budget.
Yeah.
It's only a budget, so you need to be definitive because we can't generally interpret what roughly 140,000 is. So, yeah.
So do you think that's conservative?
No.
As was recommended by the finance manager, we've got more work to do on this. We'll have another budget review coming back. We'll have that more refined and ready for council. We'll be further through the swimming year and moving into that colder period where people won't be swimming. So we should have a better grasp of that.
Maybe just make a comment in passing, can't help myself, but on Facebook there's a beautiful photograph of Tumut River in the old days before the Lowering Dam went in summertime. There's kids having a swimming class in a pool in the Tumut River, and it's just beautiful. We've taken that away from them, and that's why I feel so. One of the reasons I feel so strongly about it.
I was probably in that photo. Move out of committee, please.
The paper.
Councillor Benjamin. All those in favour of moving out of committee? Passed. All right, so the movers, Councillor Ham and Cross, are you happy with the amendment?
Yes.
All right, so we'll put that amendment with the, that becomes the motion. So all those in favour? Against? That's carried. All right, governance and financial report, 8.7, statement of investments as at the 1st of January 2018. There's one recommendation there. Do we have a mover? Councillor Benjamin, seconder. Councillor Ham. Is there any discussion? I've just got a couple of questions. The Treasury Corporation at call, there seems to be a great deal of disparity between the interest rates. Why is that?
Mr Deputy Mayor, I might just refer that comment to our finance team since they're here. I have that in-depth knowledge about it.
This is on page 54 at the bottom, on the first chart and on the second chart. So essentially we've got Treasury Corporation at call. There's variations from 1.4% to 2.2% in the first chart, essentially $1.5 million, and then we've got over $2 million invested at 0.56.
So they're in different accounts and each have different rates. So some are taken out in a short-term investment, some are medium-term and some long-term, so they have different rates and perform differently at the end of each month.
But if they're at call, wouldn't that mean that they're...
So we can call down on those funds and give them either for 3 to 5 days when we have the cash in our bank.
Well, would it not make sense to pull that ones that are at 0.5% and put them into something better, or...?
Those funds are for those the infrastructure funds and for the implementation funds. So we'd like to keep some of those at call so we can call on that cash if we need it.
Right.
And those rates are a monthly performance, so they'll change each month.
So there's a difference between at call. So they're technically not at call.
They are at call, yes. We can draw down on the funds. Some have different number of days to get the funds into our bank account.
So what's the longest amount?
5 days.
So why would it doesn't make any sense to me to have it at 0.5% compared to 2 point something when there's a maximum of 5 days anyway?
We can look at each of them.
Because that's on $2 million, that's a massive amount of interest.
You also have to take into account that there's an A&P one there for $2 million at 2.2, but we have to put our funds across institutions. There's only a certain percentage that we can keep with.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the Treasury ones there. So the Treasury Corporation there, it's 0.56, it's 2.1 million or nearabouts, and then the one above it is 2.1, nearly 2.2 million. And they're 1.19 and 0.56 respectively, but we've got an at-call one which is at 2.2%.
Mr Chair, could we offer to just undertake a review and provide a little bit more detail in the commentary to the next meeting? Some good points raised there. Thank you.
The other thing that I was going to ask is that, so the funding for the sealing of the Go Cup Road, is that money that we've been given from state government, is it? For the 47,266.25 on the bottom of page 56? Because we wouldn't normally be sealing Go Cup Road, would we? Because that's a state road.
Mr. Chair, that is, we incur the expenditure and then we claim it off RMS as part of profit work. So we haven't we haven't received the cash from RMS yet for the works that we've undertaken.
Or does anyone else have anything further?
Did they give us interest?
No, the terms are 30 days.
If there's nothing else, I'll put that recommendation. All those in favour? Against? Carried. 8.8 under governance and financial reports is a donation request, Festival of the Falling Leaf. One recommendation there. Councillor Hand, who's moving that. Do we have a second? Councillor Wright, do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Hand?
I think it's a very worthwhile festival, and I think we should support it.
Councillor Ismail?
I'm concerned that we are randomly supporting festivals without a policy that suggests what we should be doing, and I perhaps would like to make a second point there that we request a development of policy, or is that going to be in operation already, Deputy Mayor?
Through the chair, the next report actually recommends developing an in-kind and financial support policy for community groups and events. So it's just the order of them is around the other way, but essentially you've got that in your next one.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any further comment? Okay, I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Against? That's carried. Uh, 9.1 management reports, a request for financial assistance from the Tumbarumba Men's Shed. We have two recommendations. Councillor Ham, are you moving both recommendations?
I'd like to speak on it. Yes, so I will move it. Yep.
Do we have a second? Councillor Wright?
I'm just wondering whether, I think we're making a decision on past history here because of Adlong Men's Shed was once rejected. I don't think we can make a decision on this until we do recommendation 2, is have a good financial in-kind assistance. So rather than declining them, I was wondering if we could refer our decision until we have a proper policy in place.
Yes.
I agree with that.
All right, well, just need a procedural motion, just to defer the point item 1 and
And if we can just write them on there.
and treat number 2 as a separate.
And once we've got a policy, we can get back to you.
So do you wish to deal with item 2 first?
Yes, please.
All right, so we'll Councillor Ham and is it Councillor Wright? Yeah. Have moved. Are you happy with that? Have moved item 2 separately. So council develop a policy on financial and in-kind assistance to the community. Any discussion on that? All right, I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Against? It's carried. And now, Councillor Ham, you're moving a deferment of matter 1. Request from the Tumbarumba Men's Shed to be brought back to council for consideration post the development of the in-kind assistance policy.
Yep.
I'll let just put procedural, this new line, please, Susan. This put procedural motion that council defer recommendation 1 in item 9.1 until a financial and in-kind assistance policy is developed. Is adopted by council probably.
In time for the, can I put an amendment, in time for the next council meeting?
Well, through the chair, can I say that's probably asking a bit much of us to do that within that time frame. The concrete driveway and that they're requesting, it can wait that period of time. I don't think it's that urgent. For us to do up that policy of such a large impact across the whole region, for us to do that properly, we'd need longer than a month to do that.
How long?
I would. Could we leave it open, given the amount of other workload we've got with amalgamation, etc.? I would try and bring it back to you within 3 months. Is that reasonable?
Within 3 months, then I would put them in.
I tried to work my way around that.
I just want to put thumbs down on this.
Well, through the chair, as has been indicated, we will write to them and say we're developing a policy as fast as we can. They'll be pleased that they haven't got a rejection on this matter, that it is actually still floating in the air. So I think that they would be pleased with that, and I can ring them personally. Given on Australia Day, they gave Councillor Cross and myself a tour of the shed and what they wanted to actually do in that location.
I'll give up.
I think it sounds sensible.
So Councillor Ham was moving the procedural motion, and the seconder was that Councillor Rock. Are you happy with that? Yeah. Does anyone else wish to speak? All those in favour? Against? Carried. Just a note there, how long are the quotes valid for? Because I noticed that that's 31st of May last year. That may need to be reviewed operationally before we... Yep.
Yeah. The applicant did make the inquiry to the relevant officers, and the relevant officers were comfortable still with the amount of quotation.
Okay, 9.2 management reports: Crown Road closures, Go Cup Road and Power, and Park Streets at Tumbarumba. 2 recommendations there. Page 80. Do we remove it? Councillor Wright? And the seconder, Councillor Benjamin. Wish to speak? Is there any further discussion? Right, I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Against? That's carried. (9.3) The Ellerslie and Duns Road extraction of timber report. There's 4 recommendations. Do we have a mover? Councillor Smith. Councillor Hand. Do you wish to speak? Councillor Smith?
No.
I'm not sure if we need to go to committee for this. Could I speak to, through the chair, if I can speak to that? Is there any way we could just have traffic lights on, sensor traffic lights on either end?
Mr. Crispin?
This report's been generated by a consultant who's accredited in the field, and it's of the opinion of the road safety order and also officers that these issues would exist whether or not the trucks were on the road or not. So there are issues that need to be addressed regardless of the increased usage that is there. So that's why we haven't gone via a temporary option. We've gone. This is the. I will say this is the minimum amount. So we haven't elected the full report in depth of all the recommendations, just the ones that would be suitable for the length of the road.
All right, there's no further debate. I'll put that. Oh, sorry, Councillor.
Yeah, point 2, should a request be made by the owner of dust strip be approved? I mean, aren't we saying come and ask for a dust strip?
They have already, haven't they?
Through the chair, they've already asked for it and council has a policy position on it already. So we've also had discussions with another operator on the road that may be interested in contributing to that as well. So there could be, it could be a 3 shared dust strip.
Okay.
Anyone else wish to speak? Can I put that motion? All those in favour? Against? It's carried. 9.4, Manager's report is the LED street lighting Southern Lights proposal. There's one recommendation. Councillor Cross, do we have a seconder? Councillor Ham. Councillor Cross, do you wish to speak?
The council of the street lighting in Tumut has always been a real concern for me, so I really welcome this program, this project to go ahead. I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, agreed.
I have some concerns in that there seems to be a future direction, maybe some way off, but where they take over the reading of water meters and such like, and I'm concerned that that's the first step in taking over the utilities away from council, and I'm not sure if I'm sort of being just a little bit too over cautious here and thinking way outside the square, but I do see that as something that's a bit of a negative.
Do you want to comment?
So the smart technology will act as repeaters, if you will. So imagine we have a server in the council chambers which will then pick up repeaters along the lines of the street lights which will pick up the meter readings. So it's not proposed to have these based in Wagga. It's still council service, but we'll be able to get real-time data on call when we need to read meters. So there'll be no more having to physically send out one of the blokes to lift it up and read it and come back and record it in comparison. The advantage of that is obviously we can put some parameters in there for early, if we're having an excessive usage on any one property which is out of the norm, we can have an alert come up and tell us, and we can ring up the customer and say, using more water than what you usually do, and they might alert them to a break that they have within their property that they wouldn't have otherwise known.
That's fantastic.
And what about the brightness of the actual light itself? I know it shows the brightness on the ground and how it's lit up, but what about the actual source of light? Is that actually brighter in itself? I mean, is it going to be those sharp, bright lights, then bright lighting up? I mean,
yep, so
there's some disadvantage in having those incredibly bright lights as points of light in a built-up area.
They have the potential to be a lot brighter. Pretty sure. Potentially very brighter, but with the smart controls you can actually dim them. And you can dim them individually. You don't have to dim the whole strip.
And they're not going to be more required to be replaced as our household ones are. Our household ones now are nowhere near as durable, although they supposedly save us energy. They certainly are being replaced more frequently.
Through the chair, the paper is about doing a briefing paper on those components and whether it would be of benefit to councils to go down that track. So rather than actually this resolution being about actually going out and doing it, all those questions will hopefully be answered in this briefing that we get back from the chair.
Thank you.
All right, any further debate? Put that motion. All those in favour? Against? It's carried. Okay, we have the minutes of the committee meetings. 10.1 is the minutes of the Tumut Youth Council committee meeting on the 7th of February. There's actually 2 recommendations there.
Through the chair, did we not pass the minutes from 355 committees now just get sent to the councillors and we're not going to pass them through the meetings anymore? I think that happened when David A. was here.
Through the chair, I believe, and I'd have to check that there's something in the legislation that says that the minutes must be formally received by council.
That's right.
So they have to somehow come onto the agenda. I think that's a good option. And maybe we can look at the ways of
Just
simplifying this
list them
process.
yeah.
Especially when you've got a whole list here and there's no, it's just receiving all of them. So
yeah.
Move the 2 recommendations.
Do we have a second? Councillor Wright? Anyone wish to speak? Move those 2 recommendations. Carried. Now, just as a sideline from that report, there's 2 issues. I noticed in the committee report on number 2, Youth Public Art Projects, it says the Tumut Skate Park scooter riders and skaters have asked for the skate park to be repainted in non-slip style paint, as currently the most used sections are slippery because of aging paint. So I just asked Mr. Christensen to give us an update on that, or
I'll look into that, Mr. Chair.
and perhaps if we could just find out. It's obviously a safety issue, so
I'll circulate the results to the councils.
if that's if it's not an extensive cost, is that something that can be just absorbed in the operational?
Through the chair, that's a maintenance issue, so we'll just undertake it if that's necessary to do.
The second item is in the general business. It says Evan was contacted by Mr. Steve Belchanes, who asked whether the Youth Council would auspice a fundraising activity for a youth member of the committee who is travelling to New Zealand to compete in basketball representing Australia. I happen to know that that person of interest is actually a Year 7 girl from Tumut High School by the name of Grace White, who has also received an award on our Australia Day presentation for her supporting ability with the teams. She represented New South Wales at state level in netball and basketball, and had to travel to Adelaide for that competition. And as a result of that, she's been selected to represent Australia in New Zealand for basketball. Previously, on previous councils, when people have been elected to play for Australia, we've given a donation to assist with the travel. And I think, given the fact that this girl's representing our country overseas and she's from Tumut, I'd like to move a motion that she be donated $500 to assist towards the travel and costs associated with representing Australia.
Yes, support that full-heartedly.
Councillor.
With a note from the Mayor saying how delighted we are.
I happen to have been president and at the last school function for the year where she was got so many awards for her prowess in sport. Quite a remarkable person.
Yeah, it's an amazing achievement.
To the sports person who is representing Australia at the New Zealand basketball championships. Can this be funded? Oh, you've got the person's name.
So, Mr. Deputy Mayor, where does money like that come from? Like, have we just got a bit of a...
The General Manager said that we could find it in the operational savings.
We do actually have a financial support budget as well.
Right.
So this be funded from...
I think previously, we sort of, when they got to Australia level, we assisted, but any state level stuff was sort of just probably something we need to
Have a policy.
have a policy on.
Just to raise that through the chair, that will fit into that in-kind financial support policy as well. So,
They funded themselves in so many trips already.
Yes.
To get to this point.
May I just note through the chair that we're talking about $500 here as composed to how much for the Calbingo men's shed?
$10,000.
$10,000, and our budget, $10,000 is a significant impact on our budget. $500 is not that significant, hence the reason why you could make a decision on a smaller matter but not a larger matter. in case you ask that question.
Is there any further discussion? I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Against? That's carried. Minutes of the committee meetings, Tumbarumba Progress Association held on the 6th of December 2017. Just one recommendation there that the general minutes of the Tumbarumba Progress Association be noted. Do you have a mover? Councillor Wright, and seconded by Councillor Hand. Anyone wish to comment? All those in favour? Against? That's carried. 10.3, the minutes of the Batlow Development League meeting held on the 12th of December 2017. There's two motions there. Councillor Smith?
Move that.
Both motions, yeah.
The first recommendation.
You move the first one? Yes.
Speak about the second recommendation.
All right, so do you want, you're happy to move them both for discussion and
Yes.
vote on them separately? You happy with that? All right, do we have a second? Councillor Benjamin? Okay, so we'll deal with the first recommendation first, which is that the minutes of the Batlow Development League meeting held on the 12th of December 2017 be received and the following recommendations contained therein be adopted. That's moved and seconded. All those in favour? Against? That's carried. Okay, now we have the recommendation that Snowy Valley's council investigate the use of vouchers to be sent out with rate notices to enable ratepayers to dump rubbish at any time instead of free waste weekends. Councillor Schmidt.
Yeah, there was some discussion at the Batlow Development League about that issue, and I note that it involves the whole Shire, and it would benefit the whole Shire, perhaps, that instead of the free weekends, when everybody rushes off to the tip, and if it's a wet day, people miss out. But if they get a voucher to dump free rubbish on 4 occasions during the year at their own choosing, it won't be any greater cost to council, but it'll be much more convenient for the ratepayers.
Through the chair, could I suggest that we incorporate that as part of our policy for how we're going to run the waste services in the next financial year? Because we've essentially established what we're doing this financial year. The opportunity arises when we hit next financial year. So we could possibly recommend that staff consider this and other methods about the waste management budget in the forthcoming 18-19 budget and going back. If that would be suitable.
Councillor Pritchard.
Whether it needs to be going as an amendment or not, that should be non-transferable.
Yeah.
Otherwise we'll set up a market.
Yeah, true.
No, it's
A black market for waste vouchers.
I wouldn't have thought that way.
So with
The
regard
only problem I see with that is, and that's an issue that needs to be considered, of course, is that it's only going to ratepayers, and there are lots of people who pay rent who are able to go down and use the free waste weekends, and they would not therefore have that opportunity. So you're eliminating quite a large proportion of our population, and I think that's a big disadvantage.
And people who pay their rates in full, they only get the one rate notice.
No.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
You have hold on file 4 every
Yeah.
But it's just the disadvantages yet again, those socioeconomic group of people who, to be perfectly honest, was one of the reasons why those free weekends were set up in relation to the number of unused mattresses and so on. As people who socioeconomically move around a lot, that particular item becomes a disposable item.
Yes.
So it was to do with eliminating that particular element.
I think that we can discuss in the next budget anyway.
Yeah, I can see the dumpers too.
Mm.
Yeah.
Is it feasible to maybe have the free waste once a month instead of once a quarter or something?
How about we workshop this as part of the budget process and come up with a whole lot of ideas, and then Mr. Christensen can go about evaluating those options and coming back with a recommendation.
So do we wish to defer that?
Through the chair, I've worded a resolution up there, which is a slight variation. That is Susan. Or you can broaden that out to just say the council investigate different options rather than actually stating one particular option.
Yeah,
That's a good idea.
I would agree with that.
For management of waste.
Because we're probably not far off getting a report back on the green waste as well, are we?
I'm not sure whether it's up to.
Could we eliminate to be sent out with ratepayer analysis?
You would need to in this case, wouldn't we?
in ratepayers.
And change ratepayers to residents.
Yeah.
Through the chair, Matt, you can probably help me out there. Waste management's a pretty broad task. What would you like it to narrow it down to?
Through the chair, I'd like to keep it broad.
It's just about the free component of it, that's all.
Through the chair, the costs of these services will depend on what other costs that council would like to have. So the services such as the green waste bin, it might be a good time to have a look at all services provided and then compare the new services you'd like to and the cost of those. I think it's all to keep it broad and allow that flexibility.
So that was Councillor Smith and Councillor Benjamin. Are you happy with that?
Yes, I am.
Is there any further discussion? Anyone wish to speak against it? I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Against? That's carried. 10.4, the minutes of the Tumar Recreation Reserve Committee meeting held on the 16th of January. Have one recommendation.
Only that Julie Han wasn't there, but Julia Han was.
Picky.
I know.
These are what you choose.
Yeah.
So, Councillor Ham, you're moving that?
That's fine.
That's fine. Do we have a second though? Councillor Wright, any discussion? All those in favour? Against? That's carried. Minutes of the Tumbarfest, which is
This weekend.
coming up this weekend, so it's 10.5.
Difficult to read on the tablets. Difficult to read on the tablets being
Sideways.
landscape.
And, yeah. It's also very, very, like, you know, it's the 31st now, we've had 4 meetings, it's hard to make comments on something that's not current.
So who's moving those minutes to? Councillor Benjamin, Councillor Ham, all those in favour? Against? That's carried. On behalf of the Mayor Hayes and the executive team, the rest of the council, I'd like to wish the organising committee all the best for the Tumbar Fest this weekend, and publicly acknowledge all those that have participated and been involved in the committee and the behind the scenes workings of getting that to be the success that it's been over a large number of years, and obviously will be on the weekend. So big thank you to all those volunteers and all the staff who've made the effort to turn it into such a wonderful success over so many years, and we wish you all the best for the weekend.
If I may, just Tumbarumba Chamber of Commerce met last night, and they were just so delighted, and many thanks. I know Matt and Glenn, and you guys have just really pushed it, and thank you. And it was really good to hear all the locals just appreciate it so much. It looks fantastic, doesn't it?
Excellent. All right, that concludes the ordinary section. There is no confidential matters for consideration at this meeting. Is there any other business that any of the councillors wish to raise?
Mr. Head, I'd like to ask where Riley Spicer's presentation is up to, whether he's up and running or what's happening with that. If we know.
Yeah, through the chair, we'll get an update on that and circulate that out to councillors.
Thank you.
Councillor Hand?
I have some concerns about the caravan park. Now that looks fantastic. But I'm concerned, well, and I know there's a blowout, that's fine, it's not a problem, but I'm concerned that the lease has not been signed and stage 2, well, one, we need to find out what the blowout's been, and 2, I am concerned if we start stage 2 without having a signed lease, and I feel for the leasee and the lessor. I think we're in really dangerous territory not having a signed agreement. And whether we could get together with all the stakeholders involved and finally get this lease signed off before we spend any more money.
Through the chair, we'll take that on as an operational matter. I believe that we have staff already working on those lease documents. So.
Thank you.
I have just one question on it. Was landscaping and that, is that all budgeted for? Is that happening or?
Through the chair, can we provide you an update on that?
Yeah.
All right.
Just a question. What's the situation with apprentices in the show? Do we have a full load of apprentices? Well, I don't think there's one on Parks and Gardens at the moment.
Through the chair, we're going to provide you with part of the IP&R documentation is about staff strategy, so that will be incorporated into that document.
All right. Thank everyone for their participation today and declare the meeting closed.